You are walking a trail at dusk, alone, the light going copper through the trees. And all around you, in the brush you cannot see into, there are eyes. Not a few. Dozens, maybe hundreds, tracking the shape of you as you pass. Animals that could close the distance in under 3 seconds. Animals with the jaw strength to end you before the thought finished forming in your head. And not one of them moves. You walk out the other side of those woods and you call it peaceful. You felt nothing watching you. That feeling of nothing is the strangest thing about you, and almost no one notices it. Because every animal in that brush ran a calculation as you passed, and every one of them arrived at the same answer. Not this one. Not today. The question is why. And the real answer has almost nothing to do with you being lucky, or them being full, or the woods being safe. The real answer is a decision. A decision made about you, often long before you ever set foot under those trees. And by the time we reach the bottom of it, the quiet of that forest is going to sound like something else entirely. Start with the simplest version of the calculation, the one happening in the mind of a wolf. On Isle Royale, an island of dark spruce in the cold of Lake Superior, biologists have watched wolves hunt moose for more than 60 years. It is the longest study of predator and prey ever run. And the thing that surprises people most is how often the wolves lose. They test moose constantly, dozens at a time across a winter, and the overwhelming majority of those moose simply stand their ground or trot away and live. The wolves let them go. Because a moose is not food the way a sandwich is food. A moose is 900 pounds of muscle with hooves that swing like sledgehammers. One kick to the skull, one cracked rib that turns into infection, and the wolf that was hungry yesterday is dead by spring. Every predator on Earth lives one bad decision away from its own ending. The hunt is never just about the meal. It is always, underneath, about whether this particular meal is worth dying for. So here is the part that should stop you. When that wolf looks at a moose and decides to walk away, it is running the exact same arithmetic it runs when it looks at you. Reward against risk, calories against the chance of catastrophe, and you, standing there soft and slow and strange, are almost always filed under not worth it. But here is where it gets stranger. Because that calculation about you was not made in the moment you appeared. For most of the animals watching you, it was finished long before you arrived. They had already decided. You just walked into the answer. To understand how an animal decides about a threat it has not even met yet, you have to leave the wolves and go to Yellowstone, into a quiet revolution in the science of fear. In the early 2000s, a researcher named John Launder was studying elk in the years after wolves returned to the park, and he noticed the elk were behaving as if the landscape itself had become dangerous. Not because wolves were everywhere, because wolves might be anywhere. The elk grazed differently in the open meadows than in the tight valleys where escape was hard. They carried a map in their heads of where death was likely to live. Launder gave that map a name that has shaped the field ever since. He called it the landscape of fear. And that is the key that unlocks the whole mystery. Animals do not respond to predators. They respond to the possibility of predators, painted across the geography of their entire world. Every meadow, every water's edge, every stand of trees carries a number in their mind, a risk score. And once you understand that, you can ask the question that nobody thought to ask for a very long time. What if the fear, all by itself, with no actual predator anywhere near, is doing real damage to the animal's body? That question was answered on a scatter of islands off the coast of British Columbia, and the answer is one of the most unsettling experiments in modern biology. Two scientists, Liana Zanet and Michael Clinchy of Western University in Canada, found song sparrows nesting on islands where they could control everything. They fenced and protected the nests so that not a single real predator could reach the eggs or the chicks. The birds were, in physical fact, completely safe. Then, through hidden speakers, for whole breeding seasons they played sounds. To some sparrows, the calls of harmless creatures. To others, the calls of predators. Hawks, raccoons, the voices of things that eat sparrows and their young. Nothing ever touched those birds. No claw, no beak, no attack. Only the sound, only the fear. The frightened sparrows raised 40% fewer young. They laid fewer eggs. They fed their chicks less, because a parent that is terrified leaves the nest less often and watches the sky more. 40% of a generation, erased by a feeling. Let that settle for a second. Fear does not need to catch you to kill your bloodline. The terror itself has a body count. So now hold those two facts together. Animals carry a map of where danger lives, and the fear on that map is powerful enough to reshape their bodies and their futures without a single drop of blood being spilled. Which means, somewhere on the map inside every wild animal near you, there is a marker, a risk score for the thing you are, and the only question left is how high that number goes. The same researchers wanted to know, so they stopped testing songbirds, and they went after the predators themselves. In the Santa Cruz Mountains of California, a team including Zanette, Clinchy, and a young scientist named Justin Serasi set up an experiment around the kills of mountain lions. Pumas, the apex carnivore of that whole landscape, an animal afraid of essentially nothing, that drags down deer twice its weight in the dark. The researchers rigged speakers near fresh puma kills, and when a lion returned to feed, they played one of two things. Sometimes the calls of frogs, and sometimes the sound of people, simply talking. Calm human voices, the kind you would hear at any dinner table. The frogs meant nothing to the lions. They fed without concern. But the moment a puma heard a human voice, it fled. It abandoned the deer it had worked and risked to kill, the meal it needed to survive, and it slipped away into the dark, often not coming back for the rest of the night. The single most dangerous predator in California, driven off its own food by the sound of someone talking. Now maybe you are already building the obvious objection. Maybe it is not human specifically. Maybe any new strange sound spooks a wary animal. A loud noise, a surprise, anything unfamiliar. The researchers had thought of that, which is exactly why the frogs were in the experiment. Same speakers, same volume, same surprise, an unfamiliar sound in the night. And the lions did not care. Only the human voice emptied the clearing. It was not novelty, it was us, and the same thing was happening clear across an ocean. In England, the team played a whole menu of sounds to wild badgers at their sets, the growls of bears, the snarls of wolves, and the barks of dogs, predators that have hunted badgers for as long as there have been badgers, and mixed in, among them, again, human voices. The badgers were more afraid of the people than of the bears. They hesitated longest, fed least, hid most, when the threat was the sound of a human being calmly speaking. An animal that has every evolutionary reason to fear a bear was more frightened of a voice like yours, and you will see, in just a moment, why that single comparison cracks the whole thing open. Because if a badger fears a human more than a bear, you have to ask the real question. The one this entire mystery has been circling from the start. Where exactly does the human being rank? Not above the frog. Not above the stranger in the night. We know that. The question is whether we rank above the lion, whether we sit at the very top of the landscape of fear for every animal on Earth. To answer that, the researchers went to the one place that could put it to a clean test, the African savanna, the kingdom of the lion. In the greater Kruger region of South Africa, Liana Zanette and her colleagues set up hidden cameras and speakers at waterholes, the beating heart of that ecosystem, where every animal must eventually come to drink. And there, to 19 different species, they played a contest of fear. On some nights, the sound of lions. Not lions roaring to announce themselves, but lions snarling and growling among themselves. The intimate, unmistakable sound of the apex predator close by. The most frightening thing that should exist in that world. And on other nights, they played human voices. People, in the local languages of the region, simply talking. No shouting. No gunshots. Conversation. The animals were roughly twice as likely to run from the humans as from the lions. They abandoned the water faster, fled farther, and stayed away longer when the threat was a human voice. Elephants, the largest land animals alive, animals that will stand and face down a pride of lions, turned and left. Rhinoceros left. Giraffe, antelope, warthog, all of them, more terrified of the murmur of human speech than of the predator that has hunted them since before our species had a name, and the detail that should put ice in your spine. The leopards left too. Leopards, predators in their own right, killers of the savannah. They heard the lions and they tolerated it. They heard the humans and they fled. Stop and hold that. The lion is the apex predator of the African savannah, and it is not the apex predator the animals fear most. We are. Across nearly every species tested, on 2 continents, in the water and on the land, the most terrifying sound in the natural world is the sound of a person talking. So go back to the woods. Go back to you on that trail at dusk with the hundreds of eyes and the peace you thought you felt. You were wrong about what that peace was. The animals in that brush did not decide you weren't worth killing. They decided you were the most dangerous thing they had ever encountered. The stillness was not tolerance, and it was not indifference. It was the held breath of a creature praying the most lethal predator on earth would simply keep walking and leave. The forest was not peaceful. The forest was hiding. Which leaves the largest question of all, the one we can finally face now that we know where we stand. What did we do to earn that? Why does a leopard fear your voice more than a lion's? We have no claws. We do not look like much. By the standards of the savannah, we are slow, soft, badly armed. And yet every wild thing has filed us at the very top of the map of death. The reason is not in our bodies, it is in our behavior. And once you see it, you cannot unsee what kind of predator you actually are. In 2015, a team led by Chris Darramont of the University of Victoria published a study in the journal Science that measured exactly how humans hunt compared to every other predator on the planet. And the numbers are unlike anything else in the living world. Across many species, humans kill adult prey at up to 14 times the rate that other predators do. 14 times. But the rate is not even the deepest part. It is what we kill that breaks the pattern of 4 billion years of life. Every other predator, the wolf, the lion, the orca, takes the easy ones. The young, the old, the sick, the weak, the members the herd can lose. They crop the edges of a population and leave its strong, breeding core intact. Which is exactly why prey species survive their predators across the ages. We do the opposite. We target the adults, the big bull, the prime stag, the breeding female, the strongest fish in the school. Darramont called us the super predator, and the name has stuck across the science ever since. We are the predator that eats the future. The one that removes not the spare members, but the ones the whole population is built on. No animal in the history of the earth has ever hunted like that, and on some level we do not fully understand yet, the animals know. Now you might reasonably push back here. You might say, this is just guns. This is just modern industrial humanity, and the fear is recent, learned from rifles and traps in living memory. But that does not survive the evidence. The pumas in California, the badgers in England, many of the animals at those waterholes fled human voices in places where they are protected, where they are not hunted at all, where the people they hear are tourists and researchers who never harm them. The fear has outrun the hunting. It has detached from any single bad experience and become something deeper, something baked in. A mother teaches it to her young in the way she startles. It passes down. It has become part of what these animals simply are. And that inheritance has a cost. And this is the part that should sit heaviest. Remember the song Sparrows. Fear alone, with no predator that ever touches them, cuts a generation by nearly half. The same machinery is running in every animal that fears us. Less time at the water, less time feeding, more energy burned on vigilance, fewer young raised. We are reshaping the bodies and the bloodlines of animals we will never see, never hunt, never lay a finger on. Simply by being a voice in the dark that they have learned, in their marrow, to dread. We do not have to kill them to diminish them. We are doing it just by existing within earshot. So think about what that means for the smallest moment of your life. You raise your voice on a trail. You laugh with a friend in a campground. You speak idly under the trees. And in a radius around you that you will never perceive, the world goes silent, intense, and afraid. Animals stop eating. Mothers pull their young closer. Predators that fear nothing else flee. You are, every time you open your mouth in a wild place, broadcasting the single most frightening signal in the natural world, and you have never once heard the panic you cause. So, we can finally answer it. Why have most wild animals already decided not to kill you? Not because you are lucky. Not because they are gentle. Not because the woods are at peace. They have decided not to kill you because you frighten them more than the lion does. Because somewhere in the long inheritance of their kind, your species was written down as the apex of all apexes. The predator that takes everything and leaves no future, and the only safe response to you is to freeze, and hide, and let you pass. The mercy in those woods was never theirs. It was their terror, wearing the face of calm. And yet here is the part even the scientists cannot reach. We can measure the fleeing. We can count the lost offspring, the abandoned kills, the seconds shaved off feeding at the water. We can map the fear from the outside with cameras and speakers and numbers. But what it is like, on the inside, to live an entire life inside that fear, to be born already knowing that the most dangerous thing in your world might at any moment start talking nearby, no instrument has ever touched that. We have made ourselves the monster at the center of the animal mind, and we cannot yet see what we look like from in there. So walk back out of those trees at dusk, the light going dark now between the trunks. Feel that quiet you used to call peaceful. It is still there. The eyes are still on you. But now you know what the silence is. The wilderness was never ignoring you. It was holding its breath, waiting for the most dangerous animal it has ever known to finish passing through and disappear.